The shift happens so gradually, you almost miss it entirely. At first, there are small signs. Messages take longer to arrive. Responses grow briefer. Interest in your world diminishes. Their energy feels different. You convince yourself it means nothing. You practice patience. You offer understanding. But somewhere beneath the surface, intuition whispers that something fundamental has changed. Not loudly, just persistently, like watching a light fade while you're still standing in the glow. The hardest part isn't watching them create space. It's the absence of explanation. When emotional withdrawal begins, announcements rarely follow. No clear conversation marks the transition. They never pinpoint the moment their choice shifted. Instead, distance accumulates slowly, and you find yourself analyzing past interactions, questioning your actions, wondering whether connection was ever as mutual as your heart believed it to be. This content won't offer comforting illusions. It delivers truth that stings before it liberates, because withdrawal always carries meaning. And recognizing that meaning clearly will hurt initially, but understanding finally stops the internal hemorrhaging. Point 1. Emotional distance reflects choice, not uncertainty. Perhaps the most damaging belief we hold is that people withdraw because clarity eludes them, that they're uncertain about desires, simply overwhelmed by circumstances. The reality cuts deeper. Distance seldom happens accidentally. Actions may confuse, but behavior speaks honestly. Withdrawal isn't about lacking understanding. It's understanding without bravery. It's gradually preferring ease over intimacy, evasion over openness. From a psychological lens, detachment begins when internal alignment shifts. Something fundamental no longer resonates strongly enough to maintain full engagement. Rather than confronting this reality directly, they retreat incrementally. This creates pain because your investment remains active. You're still contributing, still believing effort can restore what's dissolving. But relationships don't collapse when feelings vanish. They collapse when someone abandons emotional accountability. And here's what devastates most. They recognize the growing gap. They're conscious of it. They simply lack sufficient motivation to bridge it. That understanding shatters hearts. Not because you were inadequate, but because you showed up authentically in a space where they became only partially present. Grasping this doesn't eliminate suffering, but it prevents self-blame for another person's emotional retreat. Point 2. Unexplained absence communicates louder than words. Silence carries weight. Silence conveys messages. When someone creates distance without clarification, your nervous system reads abandonment. Your mind begins searching for logic, reviewing memories, replacing certainty with self-criticism. This explains why silence damages more than clear rejection. Rejection provides closure. Silence leaves you floating, anticipating, analyzing, questioning. From a psychological framework, unresolved separation creates emotional fixation. You're no longer connected to the individual. You're connected to the potential of their return, and that distinction destroys. Silence lets them escape responsibility while you shoulder all emotional burden. You mourn something that hasn't formally concluded, making the wound feel perpetual. But recognize this truth. If reassurance mattered to them, they'd provide it. If they treasured the bond, they wouldn't leave you interpreting signals. Silence isn't gentleness. It's evasion wearing a calm mask. Once you embrace that reality, you stop anticipating words that were never coming. Point 3. Recognition arrives before acceptance. Your inner knowing perceives long before your emotions can process it. You detect the transformation. The atmosphere shifts. Exchanges feel manufactured. Anxiety surfaces without obvious cause. That's not paranoia. That's awareness. Your body registers emotional absence before your conscious mind articulates it. That explains feeling unsettled even when nothing overtly wrong has occurred. But because acceptance brings pain, you bargain with what's real. You justify their patterns. You diminish your requirements. You suppress intuition to preserve connection. This internal battle exhausts you. The truth is, intuition doesn't shout. It lingers. It echoes quietly until you possess strength enough to acknowledge it. When you finally do, pain arrives. But so does freedom from confusion, because clarity, however painful, surpasses false optimism. Point 4. Feelings don't vanish. Consistent presence does. People don't suddenly stop caring. They stop appearing. Emotion fades when mutual investment stops, when emotional availability becomes selective, when one person sustains the relationship while the other gradually withdraws. You might still experience care, but care alone cannot preserve connection without reciprocal consistency. This represents the heartbreak people rarely discuss. Caring for someone who remains physically near but emotionally absent. You experience isolation beside them, unseen by them. And that particular loneliness transforms you. It demonstrates that affection without presence equals self-betrayal, and choosing yourself becomes the only path to survival. Point 5. Painful truth breaks hearts to preserve them. Truth doesn't arrive tenderly. It comes when you're depleted from maintaining appearances. It fractures your heart because it dismantles illusion, the optimism, the waiting, but it also returns your agency. When you cease pursuing someone who's withdrawing, you recover dignity, vitality, emotional security. The heartbreak isn't penalty, it's safeguarding, because remaining in emotional uncertainty would erode you gradually. Truth hurts once, but heals permanently. Final reflection: if they're stepping back, release them. Not from lack of caring, but because you value yourself enough to stop requesting presence. You don't lose people who depart. You lose fantasies, and what emerges is self-respect, clarity, and emotional tranquility. Truth will fracture your heart, but it will also reconstruct it, stronger, wiser, and less willing to accept partial love again. Eventually, you'll understand the distance wasn't personal rejection, it was cosmic redirection, and genuine love will never demand you diminish, wait endlessly, or question your value. If this resonated with you, you're not walking this path alone. Subscribe to Psychology Wisdom for profound emotional insights, relationship clarity, and understanding that transforms pain into growth. Like this video to help someone who needs this message today, and share below. Have you experienced someone creating emotional distance recently?